I knew it was over the moment Brad didn't make eye contact. That fresh-faced MBA prince, straight off some Silicon Valley ego trip, sat across from me like I was a quarterly expense that needed cutting. He smelled like overpriced cologne and daddy's money. The name's Tom Caldwell, by the way. 58 years old, and I just spent 31 years at TechFlow Dynamics building the very systems that made their FBI contracts worth a damn. Now I was being optimized right out the door. The conference room felt smaller than usual. Brad had chosen the glass-walled fishbowl on purpose, maximum visibility for minimum privacy. Half the engineering floor could watch my execution if they bothered to look up from their monitors. In the Navy, we called this kind of thing a public hanging. His first words weren't hello or thanks for your service, but let's talk about restructuring our human capital assets. Restructuring human capital assets. I'd spent 31 years building encryption systems that kept our nation's communications secure. Before that, 20 years in the Navy learning what real leadership looked like. And now this kid was restructuring me into unemployment with MBA buzzwords. Tom, he said, flipping open my review folder like it was a takeout menu, you've done solid work, but you've been here a long time. We need people who are agile, who understand AI integration and machine learning paradigms. I felt that old familiar calm settle over me, the same feeling I used to get before a combat mission. In the Navy, they taught us to assess threats methodically. Brad Hoffman was definitely a threat, just not the kind I was used to dealing with. See, Tom, he continued, leaning back like he owned the world, we're moving away from legacy architecture. Your encryption protocols represent old thinking. We need microservices, cloud-native approaches, quantum-ready algorithms. This kid couldn't debug a Hello World program, but he'd read enough TechCrunch articles to sound dangerous. Our investors are excited about our next-gen platform, Brad went on. Clean slate design, modern frameworks, AI-enhanced security protocols, the kind of innovation that wins government contracts today. I let him talk. Rule number 1 from my destroyer days, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. Brad was explaining exactly how much he didn't understand about the systems he was inheriting. What I'm saying, Tom, is that your skill set doesn't align with our future vision. We need digital natives, people who think in cloud architectures. Your expertise in traditional encryption methods? Well, that's just not where the industry is heading. The irony was perfect. Brad was explaining why my work was obsolete while sitting in a building protected by systems I'd designed. Every email he sent, every file he accessed, all secured by legacy protocols I'd written before he'd graduated high school. I want to be fair, he continued. You've been loyal to TechFlow, so we're prepared to offer you a generous severance package. 6 months salary, extended health benefits, and a positive reference. Generous. 6 months for 31 years. Of course, this transition needs to happen quickly. Clean breaks are better for everyone. We're asking you to clear out your workspace today and transition your responsibilities to the team. I watched Brad's mouth keep moving, but my mind was elsewhere. Back to 1993, first day at TechFlow. The company was 20 people in a converted warehouse, all ex-military, all believing we were building something that mattered. I remembered 2011, during the great reorganization when half the company got laid off and nobody knew if we'd survive. That's when I'd filed the provisional patent. Just covering my bases, Tony Walsh had said. Tom? Brad's voice cut through my memories. I need you to acknowledge that you understand the terms. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Designer glasses, perfect teeth, Harvard MBA pin on his lapel like a medal. This kid had never built anything in his life. Never stayed up 72 hours straight fixing a critical system failure. I understand, I said quietly. Great. Brad smiled and slid a tablet across the table. Just need your signature on the termination agreement. The tablet showed a standard separation document, legal language about confidentiality and non-compete clauses. I skimmed through it, noting the usual corporate boilerplate about intellectual property assignment and company ownership of work products. Standard stuff, except for one thing they'd missed. Brad, I said, stylus hovering over the signature line, quick question about IP ownership. This assigns all work products to TechFlow, but what about innovations created before formal assignment agreements were completed? He blinked. I'm sorry? Patents filed under individual names during provisional periods, before final company assignment paperwork gets processed. I What are you talking about? Of course he didn't know. Brad had been in elementary school when I'd filed those papers. Nothing important, I said, signing the tablet. Just curious about edge cases. Brad relaxed. Right, well, our legal team handles all that technical stuff. I'm sure everything's properly documented. I handed the tablet back. I'm sure it is. Excellent. Brad stood up, extending his hand. Tom, I want you to know this isn't personal. It's just business. The market demands innovation, and sometimes that means making difficult decisions about human resources. Human resources, not people. Resources. I shook his hand. 20 years of military bearing dies hard. No hard feelings, Brad. You're just doing what you think is best for the company. Exactly. He seemed relieved that I wasn't going to make a scene. I really appreciate your professionalism about this. I stood up, tucked the termination folder under my arm, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, I turned back. Brad, can I give you one piece of advice from one professional to another? He nodded, already reaching for his phone. In the military, we have a saying, don't fire your artillery until you know where your ammunition depot is. He looked confused. I'm sorry, what does that mean? You'll figure it out, I said and walked out. The engineering floor had gone quiet. Not obviously quiet, people were still typing, phones were still ringing, but that underlying hum of conversation had stopped. Everyone knew what had just happened in the fishbowl. I walked past cubicles I'd helped design, servers I'd configured, whiteboards covered with architecture diagrams I'd drawn, 31 years of institutional knowledge walking toward the exit. My desk looked smaller than I remembered. My space had accumulated the usual debris of a long career. Technical manuals, family photos, military commendations in cheap frames. Rex's picture sat front and center, German Shepherd, 8 years old, the most loyal colleague I'd ever had. Behind it, a smaller frame with my Navy destroyer, USS Halsey. Those were good years. Clear mission, competent leadership, people who understood that experience counted for something. I opened the desk drawers methodically. Personal items in the box, company property stayed behind. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of printouts, my fingers found something I'd forgotten was there. A business card, faded, corners bent. Sarah Walsh, intellectual property attorney, Tony's sister. I'd kept it all these years without really thinking about why. Maybe I'd known this day would come. I didn't go home right away. I went to Murphy's Diner down the street, got myself black coffee and a moment to think. You know Murphy's red vinyl booths, waitresses who've been there since the Bush administration, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I sat there and just breathed. Not raging, not planning anything dramatic, just thinking. TechFlow had been my whole adult life after the Navy. I joined when we were still operating out of a converted warehouse in Reston, back when defense contractors were scrappy operations run by ex-military guys who understood the mission. I'd watched us grow from a 20-person shop to a $2.8 billion FBI favorite. And all of it, the infrastructure, the architecture, the core encryption protocols had my fingerprints in the foundation. I didn't document everything the way some fresh college kid might. I lived that code. It wasn't in a manual somewhere. It was in my head, built over years of late nights and impossible deadlines. I paid Murphy in cash, walked 2 blocks in the wrong direction just to clear my head. Then I caught a cab. Not an Uber, a damn yellow cab like I used to take back when TechFlow couldn't afford proper parking. Home smelled like old leather and Rex's dog food. My German Shepherd looked up from his bed, tail wagging but cautious. Dogs know when something fundamental has shifted in their world. I set the termination folder on my kitchen table, poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff, not the daily drinker, and opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Buried beneath tax returns and expired warranties was a slim manila envelope. No label, just the weight of foresight and old habits. Inside was the original provisional patent application. My name at the top, not TechFlow's, mine. Filed in March 2011 during one of the company's many chaotic reorganizations when legal was more focused on staying solvent than minding the intellectual property register. I'd been advised by someone much smarter than me, Tony Walsh, my old Navy buddy turned IP attorney, to hold the provisional rights until things settled. Tom, he'd said over beers at an Arlington dive bar, file it under your name. You can always assign it later once the company's stable and they remember to cut you in properly. They never got stable. They just got greedy. and they sure as hell never remembered. TechFlow had been licensing my core encryption framework the entire time. Lawyers had drafted agreements, temporary ones with expiration clauses, and one very specific condition buried in the legal text like a landmine with a 13-year fuse. In the event of involuntary termination without cause, reversion of rights shall trigger automatically within 72 business hours of formal notice. Signed, stamped, filed with the USPTO. And nobody at TechFlow ever followed up because nobody thought I would ever leave. I was the foundation guy, the reliable old dog, the one who kept the lights on while executives played musical chairs. Guess what, Brad? You just pulled the pin. The funny thing about working in defense for 31 years is you learn to think strategically. You don't react emotionally. You assess the situation, identify your assets, and execute with precision. Right now, sitting in my kitchen with Rex at my feet and bourbon warming my throat, I was doing exactly that. My phone buzzed every few minutes. Slack messages from coworkers trying to figure out what happened. Sorry to hear, Tom. Please stay in touch. The kind of messages people send when they're scared they might be next. HR had sent an exit survey link, like I was going to rate my execution experience out of 5 stars. I didn't answer any of them. Let them wonder. They'd all stood there and watched it happen like a corporate funeral where nobody brings flowers. Not one person had spoken up when Brad handed me that folder. But here's what they didn't know. What Brad and his MBA brain trust couldn't possibly understand. I wasn't just another employee walking out the door. I was the architect walking away from a building he still owned the blueprints to. And those blueprints were about to become very, very expensive. I stood in the hallway for a good 10 minutes, staring at the closet I hadn't opened in over a decade. Top shelf. Old banker's box labeled Original IP Archive Personal, the kind of thing you keep meaning to throw away but never do. I sat cross-legged on the floor like I was back in the Navy, going through classified documents. Brittle printouts and coffee-stained notebooks scattered around me. My handwriting from 2011 looked like it belonged to a different man, one who hadn't yet learned how little the corporate world valued quiet excellence. Then I found it. Manila envelope, thick paper, crisp edges, still sealed with the original notary stamp. The date made my chest tight. March 15th, 2011. Filed under my name, not TechFlow's, not on behalf of. Mine. Back then, I was just trying to protect my work. We were a small team, and I didn't trust the startup chaos. Half the company was ex-military guys who understood operational security, but the other half were business school types who treated intellectual property like poker chips. Tony had pulled me aside after one of those company happy hours where everyone pretended the funding situation wasn't desperate. "Tom," he'd said, "I've seen this movie before. File it under your name. You can always sign it over later when things stabilize." They never stabilized. They just got profitable. The formal assignment of rights had always been in process. Legal kept saying they'd handle it after the next funding round, then after the FBI contract, then after the IPO talks. But nobody followed up because no one really thought it mattered. I was never going anywhere, right? I was the foundation, the reliable guy who kept the servers humming while executives collected bonuses. Until one of them, Brad, with his perfect MBA credentials and zero understanding of what actually made the company valuable, decided to modernize. I stood up, documents in hand, and walked to my desk like it was a command center. Opened the safe I hadn't touched in years. Had to try 3 combinations before I remembered my daughter's birthday, my enlistment date, the day I started at TechFlow. Tucked the envelope inside. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was reconnaissance. I stared at the blinking cursor on my laptop for a while, then opened an encrypted email to Sarah Walsh. Subject line, "Need you to verify a clause." I attached a scan of the provisional filing. The fine print was almost elegant in its precision. Should the inventor be terminated involuntarily and without cause, reversion of full ownership shall occur within 72 business hours of official notice. I typed, "Still valid?" Hit send. Then I sat there in the blue glow of my screen, bourbon warming in my hand, Rex curled against my leg like a silent co-conspirator. The phone buzzed again, voicemail from Brad. I didn't listen. Probably some sanitized corporate speak about knowledge transfer protocols or transition planning. Too late for that. Sarah called me back before sunrise, Colorado time. I picked up on the first ring. "Does the clause still stand?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. I could hear papers rustling, the soft click of her reading glasses. Sarah was the methodical type, the reason she'd made partner at her firm after Tony retired. She didn't give legal opinions based on hope. Finally, she exhaled. Yes, and if they terminated you Monday at 4:15, it triggered reversion the moment you walked out. I didn't speak. She added, Tom, you kept that clause active for 13 years. The core encryption patent just reverted to you automatically. I hung up without a goodbye. Not rudeness, just efficiency. There was work to do, and every second counted. That 72-hour window wasn't theoretical, it was real. By the time my kitchen clock read 6:30 a.m., I was logged into the USPTO filing system. The reversion confirmation was a pre-written template, something Tony and I had drafted back in 2011 just in case. I remember him saying, you probably won't ever need this, but I've seen too many good engineers get screwed by companies that forgot who built their success. Smart bastard. I opened the encrypted folder, double-checked the signature fields, and filled out the formal reversion notification. It wasn't dramatic. No fancy letterhead or cease and desist fanfare. Just a quiet checkbox next to involuntary termination without cause, followed by a digital timestamp and a few upload fields. Click submit. That was it. With that single click, ownership of TechFlow's crown jewel, the encryption algorithm that powered their FBI contracts, their licensing deals, their entire investor pitch deck, slid back into my hands like a weapon returning to its rightful owner. I didn't celebrate, just leaned back in my chair, cradled my coffee, and let the silence settle. Rex jumped onto the couch and sniffed at the laptop, unimpressed by my newly acquired multi-million-dollar intellectual property. Dogs have perspective. It started with a kid, one of those overambitious summer interns TechFlow scoops up from expensive universities and feeds into the legal department like fish food. His name was probably Austin or Preston. Doesn't matter. He was tasked with monitoring USPTO activity for competitor filings. Standard procedure. Just click around, look for anything suspicious, flag if necessary. A box to check until he typed in TechFlow's own patent numbers and saw my name staring back at him. I can only imagine the moment. Mouth probably went dry. Highlighter froze mid-stroke. Maybe he thought he'd clicked the wrong link. Maybe he refreshed the page 5 times, hoping a browser glitch would magically undo a corporate aneurysm, but the truth just sat there blinking on his screen. Inventor and owner, Thomas J. Caldwell. Effective. Date, 72 hours post-involuntary termination. He flagged it, emailed it to his supervisor with a subject line like, possible issue corporate speak, for I don't want to die for this. Legal read it, paused, probably reread it 10 times, then dug through their dusty agreement folder and found the clause. The one they'd filed and promptly forgotten. The one I'd slipped in like a silent tripwire 13 years ago. It was airtight. TechFlow's $2.8 billion FBI contracts were now legally squatting on property they didn't own, and they'd already sent invitations for the Bureau demonstration. Brad, of course, handled it with all the finesse of a reality TV star caught in a scandal. I'm told he laughed when legal brought it to him. It's probably a clerical error, he said. Clerical error. Like the USPTO just accidentally handed over the company's most valuable IP to the guy he fired 48 hours ago. Then he doubled down. Told legal to keep it quiet until after the demo. Said they'd iron it out post-launch and accused the legal team of chasing phantom problems. Phantoms. I'll be sure to carve that on his career's tombstone. Meanwhile, the development team kept working like everything was fine. They had no idea they were running daily builds, scheduling final QA, printing glossy materials with buzzwords like proprietary technology and patent-protected architecture, all of which now technically belong to me. Demo day landed like a meteor. TechFlow's downtown conference center had been polished to perfection. Brushed steel, sterile spotlights, a 40-foot LED wall flashing next-gen is now. Rows of leather seats filled with FBI liaisons, existing contractors, bureau officials, every person whose signature or budget approval mattered. Brad stood backstage in a navy blazer 2 sizes too confident. He was smiling, joking with David Kim, the CTO, doing that thing executives do where they believe charisma can outpace competence. And for a minute, it looked like it might work. The intro video played glossy stock footage of server farms, diverse engineers smiling at monitors, The audience applauded politely. Brad adjusted his mic, walked to center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice smooth with self-satisfaction, "what you're about to see is the future of secure communications, a platform that will revolutionize how our federal agencies approach encrypted data transmission." He gestured to the screen behind him where the system UI loaded up. "Sleek, familiar, mine. In the next 15 minutes," he said, "we'll walk you through our most advanced iteration yet, powered by our proprietary encryption engine, developed right here at TechFlow." That's when legal moved. Not fast, not panicked, just deliberate. A tall woman in a blazer 3 shades too dark to be accidental stepped onto the stage from the wing and leaned close to Brad's ear. "I wasn't there, but I know what was said. We can't demo that system. We don't own the patent anymore." Brad blinked, laughed too loud. "Excuse me, small technical hiccup," he told the crowd. "Give us just a moment." He stepped aside with legal. The mic was still on. The whole front row heard him whisper, "What are you talking about? We've always owned that code." "No, Brad," legal replied. "You never did. Thomas Caldwell owns the IP. The reversion is final. It's logged. It's live. If we demo this, we're in willful infringement territory." The blood left Brad's face like it had been called home. Whispers started in the back. Phones lit up. Then it happened. Someone had leaked the USPTO documents to the FBI officials. Full printouts of the patent listing, along with the reversion clause in plain language, were being passed around the room. An FBI official stood up, holding the papers. "Thomas J. Caldwell," she said, "I believe this is the patent registration referenced in your marketing materials." Brad squinted. "I'm not sure where that came from." "Public record," the official said. "We all have it now." By the time Brad tried to salvage it, rambling about roadmap transparency and partnership opportunities, half the audience had already left. Quietly, deliberately. The demo was dead. I woke up the next morning to the kind of silence that only happens after something has exploded. Rex was still asleep, but my phone was vibrating like a paint mixer. 203 missed calls. The notification bar was a massacre. Voicemails, texts, LinkedIn messages from people I hadn't talked to in years. 2 urgent emails flagged from TechFlow Legal. A message from David Kim that just said, "Holy shit," and one from the company founder. I scrolled for a moment, didn't open anything, then made coffee. Let them sweat. The first call I returned was to David Kim. He'd been my ally through this whole mess, the one guy in management who understood what I'd actually built. "Tom," he said before I could speak, "they're in full panic mode. Board meeting started at 6 a.m. Brad's been locked in with legal since yesterday. How bad is it?" "Bad. The FBI is questioning every contract. Our stock dropped 30% in after-hours trading. And Brad..." David paused. "Brad's been throwing people under the bus all morning. Saying the legal team should have caught this, saying you hid the patent filing, saying nobody told him about the reversion clause. Of course he was. Guy like Brad never takes responsibility for anything." "What do you need from me, David? Honestly, they want to know your terms. The board's ready to deal." I didn't answer him on the phone. I didn't need to. 30 minutes later, I sent an email. Subject line, "Terms." Inside was a bullet point list. Calm, surgical, no legal jargon. Full licensing agreement for TechFlow to continue using patent number 8/472/639. $25 million upfront payment plus 8% ongoing royalties. CEO position with board seat and voting privileges. Public acknowledgement of original authorship. Brad Hoffman's immediate resignation. David Kim promoted to CTO with full technical authority. I ended it with a single sentence. "This is not revenge. This is realignment." Then I hit send. No signature, no warmth, just business. They didn't reply immediately. I didn't expect them to. They were likely still in crisis mode, trying to explain to investors why the guy they'd erased from the company now held every card in the deck. While I waited, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I called my daughter. Emily picked up on the third ring. "Dad?" "Hey, kiddo." The nickname felt rusty in my mouth. She was 32 now, married, living in Seattle with a husband I'd met exactly twice. "Is everything okay? You never call?" "During the day. I got fired yesterday." Silence. Then, Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. After all those years, oh, don't be sorry. It's the best thing that happened to me in a decade. I told her the whole story, the termination meeting, the patent discovery, the demo disaster. She listened without interrupting, which reminded me of her mother, my first wife, the good one, before I got too buried in work to pay attention to what mattered. Dad, she said when I finished, that's incredible. You actually did it. You beat them at their own game. I'm not done yet. What do you mean? I mean, I'm about to be CEO of TechFlow. And the first thing I'm going to do is change how we treat people. No more MBA princes firing engineers twice their age. No more treating experience like it's a liability. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm proud of you, Dad, for standing up for yourself, for fighting back. Those words hit me harder than I expected. When was the last time Emily had said she was proud of me? When was the last time I'd given her a reason to be? Listen, I said, I know I wasn't the best father. Too many missed dinners, too many work trips, too focused on building systems instead of building relationships. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I missed your wedding because of a server crash. I missed your graduation because of a Pentagon deadline. I spent 31 years building other people's dreams and forgot to build my own family. She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. It's okay, Dad. You were doing important work. No, Emily. The most important work was being your father, and I failed at that. You didn't fail. You just prioritized differently. 4 hours later, my terms were accepted. All of them. Brad's resignation was effective immediately. The board statement cited strategic differences in leadership vision, corporate speak, for we're throwing him under the bus to save ourselves. David called me with the news. Congratulations, Mr. CEO. Don't call me that yet. I haven't decided if I'm taking the job. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time I prioritized differently. That evening, I poured myself a double and sat on my back deck. The phone had finally stopped buzzing. Tomorrow, I'd have a choice to make. Take the CEO position and spend the next 5 years fixing TechFlow's culture, or walk away with my $25 million and figure out what actually mattered. Rex lay at my feet, content in the way only dogs can be. He didn't care about patents or revenge or corporate victories. He just wanted his human to be home. My phone buzzed one more time. Text from Emily. Mom and I are driving down this weekend. Time for a proper family dinner. And Dad, bring Rex. Kids want to meet their grand dog. Kids. Emily had kids I barely knew. A 6-year-old grandson who thought I was some mysterious figure who sent birthday cards with checks. A 4-year-old granddaughter I'd seen exactly twice. I leaned back in my chair and watched the city lights blink beneath me. 31 years. 31 years of making other people look smarter than they were. Of translating technical brilliance into PowerPoint slides for executives who wore suits like armor. Some people call it revenge. I call it market correction. Because when you've spent 31 years building something, you don't just walk away quietly. You make sure everyone remembers who really built it. But more importantly, you remember what you're building next. The best part? My daughter called that night. First time in 3 years she'd called just to talk. Said she was proud of her old man for finally standing up for himself. Funny how winning changes everything, even the things you thought were lost forever. Rex jumped up on the couch next to me and put his head in my lap. Dogs know when their pack is finally complete. Tomorrow I'd start building something new, something that mattered.